Rendlesham Forest Incident, a military mystery by the Tape Library.
0148, we're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmer's barnyard animals. It's very, very active, making an awful lot of noise.
Well, there it is.
Hey, I see it too. What is it?
We don't know, sir.
So, can I get some? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. Looks to be out maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out. I'm going to switch off. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been.
Yellow?
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
I have no idea what to expect. Like, as I was telling chat earlier, this is something that kind of popped on last night, and I started watching a little bit of it, but I didn't quite get any headway into this, so I have no idea what to expect from this. As I explained as well, when we start talking about the spooky, the mysterious, especially when it comes from military, they just have a different lens that they look through. It's not that I don't want to believe things, it's that I'm incredibly critical on things. I don't know. It's gonna be an interesting one. I'm very curious because I've never heard about this incident in any capacity.
In the early hours of December 26, 1980, something strange was happening in a cold, dark forest in Suffolk. They had been called to investigate a possible aircraft crash, but the closer they got to that glowing light, the more they realised something wasn't right. Little did they know, they were walking into one of the most compelling mysteries in military history. The words one of their colleagues had used just 10 minutes earlier rang in their ears as they started to doubt if they should really be out here. It didn't crash. It landed. Welcome to the Tape Library. After a few episodes of demons, ghosts, and sleep paralysis entities, I thought it would be nice to shift gears a little bit and explore a different kind of mystery, but one that is just as chilling as any haunted house. It's also such a compelling case because of the caliber of the witnesses involved. These were serious, in some cases high-ranking, military men involved in this story, many of whom would have been considered skeptics until that fateful night. What's more, it's a Christmas story. So it's the perfect way for us all to round out the year together. So get yourself a warm drink, dim the lights, and get comfortable. It's time to take a trip to the woods. Tonight we're going to be covering the tale of the Rendlesham Forest Incident. In late December, forestry worker Vince Furkettle was out chopping wood deep inside the forest. It was a quiet, foggy morning. He had seen the odd dog walker hiking through the trees, but not many. It was that odd week between Christmas and New Year, where time seems to behave a little strangely. Most people were happily tucked up in their warm homes, rather than being out in the bitter temperatures of the forest that day. But Vince was surprised when he saw a car travelling along one of the roads, and seemingly was headed in his direction. The car pulled up in front of Vince. He paused as two men in their early 30s stepped out, both dressed in suits. The first man in a well-spoken voice said to Vince, "Good morning. Do you mind if we ask you some questions?"
I mean, how do you answer that question? Do you, like, what if you answer no, like, what happens, right? I mean, generally, if someone random, regardless of if they were wearing a suit or not, walked up to me at random, especially when the first question is, why are you out here? Yeah. Like how do you just deny that? Like, yeah, like, just, that's a little strange. How do I answer this? If I answer incorrectly, do I get taken off to some random facility somewhere?
They then proceeded to fire question after question at Vince, asking if he had been out in the area last night. Had he left his house at all? Had he seen anything strange? Specifically, the two men made reference to some odd red lights in the forest, but Vince had no idea what the men were talking about. Eventually they told Vince it was probably nothing to be concerned about, got in their car and drove away. The men...
That feels creepypasta status. So, one of two things, right? So, the first thing is, can they be recognized as a government, if we're assuming this is, Men in Black, government entity status, right? If they are not officially recognized, do they have the ability to pull the U.S. government, whatever government card, right? Do they have the ability to pull the government card if they're not officially recognized? They might be compartmentally recognized if this is an official thing, and these aren't just some randoms, right? But can they claim government privilege if they are not recognized? Is there some kind of badge or seal or something that they flash that's the equivalent of a no questions asked captain? Okay, you have clearance. Second, I don't know if this is a questioning thing. This is something I'd have to look into, how people in the military extract information, people in FBI, CIA, etc. Why would they allude to an event happening? I mean, maybe it's to try to weed out dishonesty, to try and get a response from a certain red object. But it comes across to me as, are you not giving out information that you might consider vital, depending on what your reasoning for this is? They're clearly trying to assess the situation in some capacity, right? Why would they willingly give out even a modicum of information? So, I mean, and that being said, as Raven brings up, Men in Black were literally a disinformation tactic by the U.S. military to keep Black projects secret. Yeah. Can we also assume this is in good faith? Yes, no. Like, you have to... The CIA literally made modern art a psyop, right? Like Fat Electrician video status. What is and isn't true? Is everything true? Is nothing true? How much is good faith and how much is in bad faith? The answer is somewhere in the infinity of gray in between yes and no.
Never identified themselves. It would take 3 years before Vince would find out what this incident was all about, when something called the Holt Memo became front page news. Night 1. We were deep into the Cold War on that freezing night in 1980. Rendlesham Forest is situated in Suffolk, a beautiful, dense, remote woodland situated not too far from the coast. At the time, this forest wasn't just a natural landmark. It was home to 2 US-run military bases, Bentwaters and Woodbridge. They were seen as key locations for the US military in the event of a Soviet invasion into the West. They were well stocked with plenty of troops and a fleet of A-10 Warthogs in the event of the Cold War finally becoming hot after so much time. These 2 bases, however, may not have just been important as strategic locations in the event of an all-out war, however. Rumours had been circulating for years, and in some cases seemingly all but confirmed by certain individuals, that these bases were being used to house nuclear warheads. While this all sounds kind of exciting for the troops situated at Woodbridge and Bentwaters, life was anything but exciting.
I've seen that logo before. Isn't this a very prestigious chapter is the word I'm going to use for lack of the actual word? I know for a fact I have seen that logo. I know for a fact I have seen that image. And as far as I'm aware, that is a very prestigious unit to be a part of, if I remember correctly.
Rendlesham Forest was not a desirable posting for a young American Air Forceman. It was isolated and surrounded by dark forests and farmland. We were decades into the Cold War at this point, and their days were mostly spent keeping the bases maintained and running drills. The bases were running on limited men at this time of year, with many being away for the holiday period, and the base's Christmas party wasn't due until the 28th. So as Christmas night moved into Boxing Day, the lookouts were sat, twiddling their thumbs, waiting to be relieved from duty. They could not have expected what came next. Multiple troops spotted something as they were patrolling the area outside the east gate of RAF Woodbridge. They saw what appeared to be a couple of flashing lights illuminating the tree line deep into the forest. One red, one blue, both on top of each other, flashing on and off. Due to the flashing, the men immediately thought this may be an aircraft and were concerned that a small plane may have come down somewhere in the woods. But weirdly, they hadn't heard a sound. One of the guards that night was Airman First Class John Burrows, a man who would end up serving 27 years in the Air Force. They quickly got onto the phone, and after being passed around a bit, they got put through to Sergeant Jim Peniston, who decided to head to the East Gate himself, in a jeep with his driver, Edward Cabensang. When he arrived, he started to ask the men questions about the apparent crash they had seen, which led to one of the guards, Bud Steffens, telling him that it didn't look like a crash at all. He said it didn't crash, it landed. A puzzling thought for such a wooded area that
this reads to me as some sort of stealth fighter program, right? I don't know. At face value, it's kind of hard because this is peak Cold War time. Tensions were high, right? I remember watching, I think it was a Simon Whistler video of some capacity. Wasn't the Soviet Union's actual dead hand system or its actual nuclear response system actually engaged? It wasn't the dead hand system. I think it was its actual, they actually intended to launch, but there was a disconnect somewhere and they never actually launched. I still can never actually remember what that situation was or when that was. I don't have the citation for that, so I'm going to use an alleged there. But the Cold War was definitely a hot period of time that I missed. 'Cause I was born in 95, so I realistically missed all of that, right? I definitely missed a lot of that, so... I need more information.
The aircraft wouldn't be able to land in. Peniston had the control tower start putting out the word to any major airports in the area, or other Air Force bases, to see if anyone had caught anything on radar. Sure enough, an unknown object had popped up on radar in the area, but it had strangely vanished from their screens as soon as it moved over the Woodbridge area. What's more, it was revealed at a much later date by Colonel Holt, who we will be meeting a bit later, that radar operators at Bentwaters saw something pop up onto their screen, but moved with such a speed it was passed off for some kind of error. In 2015, he said he had received statements from the operators at night, and said, "I have confirmed that Bentwaters radar operators saw the object go across their 60-mile scope in 2 or 3 seconds. Thousands of miles an hour. He came across their scope again, stopped near the water tower. They watched it and observed it go into the forest where we were," said Colonel Holt. At Wattisham, they picked up what they called a bogey and lost it near Rendlesham Forest. Whatever was there was clearly under intelligent control. Peniston took Burrows, Master Sergeant Chandler, and Cabensang with him in a jeep, and headed towards the apparent source of the light. Once they had gotten close enough on the roads, 3 of the men proceeded into the forest on foot, leaving Cabensang with the jeep. However, as they proceeded into the forest, all 4 men reported their radios began to malfunction, cutting off contact not just with Cabensang, but also the base itself. Peniston instructed Chandler to return to the jeep to inform Cabensang of what had happened with the radio.
There's got to be some sort of, not rules for engagement, there's got to be some sort of procedure if that happens, right? There's got to be some sort of procedure or policy if you are entering a situation and you lose communication, something like that. It would very much surprise me if that is a just go by the seat of your pants kind of thing. Like there has to be some overarching like actual like policy out there. I mean, it depends how reliable the tech is. I mean, we've all heard the military grade jokes, but as far as I'm aware, I mean, a lot of this equipment is pretty irrelevant. It's pretty durable even. I don't know how jamming technology works. I don't know if that's actually science fiction or if we actually have jamming technology. I assume we do. That might cause something like this. Clearly, it's just a temporary knockout, so I don't think it's like, you know, an EMP or something like that. I don't think it has to do with that. That'd be very interesting to figure out how that tech works. But that also, depending on how deep that goes, might be under a layer of red tape. I don't know. That's interesting.
Leaving just Peniston and Burroughs to continue. They could see the light poking through the trees, becoming brighter and brighter as they ventured closer. They began to notice a change in the air around them. It was almost like it was charged with static electricity, a sort of tingling sensation filling the environment. Then they noticed it was becoming increasingly hard to walk. The ground was frozen solid with compacted dirt from the winter temperatures, but it felt almost like they were wading through waist-high water, or soup, as they would later describe it. As they reached the light source, they stepped out into what appeared to be a rounded clearing in the trees. As soon as they did, they were blinded by a sudden explosion of white light. Both men flung themselves to the floor, assuming there had been some sort of explosion. But after remaining face down for a few seconds, they realised there wasn't. It was just an extremely bright flash of light.
Well, remember, the sound travels slower than light, right? It's why you can see lightning strike, but you don't hear thunder until, you know, a brief moment after, right? So I'm assuming an explosion would function the same way. See light, get down, wait for boom. But if it never comes, I mean, yeah, then you're kind of sitting there just like, huh? Oh?
Now this is where things get interesting, because what happened next varies greatly in both men's reports.
Okay.
Jim Peniston stood up, and as the light faded around him, he could see, sat in the middle of the clearing, a black object. It was triangular in shape, measuring about 9 feet tall by 9 foot wide, standing on 3 legs, with rounded edges, 2 things that looked a little like wings, and a dorsal fin. Peniston noted that it was pulsing with a strange light that almost resembled a lava lamp, like the object was made of glass, with pulsing liquid lights moving around. On the side were a bunch of blue lights. On the top, a bright white light. That seemed to be the source of the blinding flash. The object made no sound. Peniston started to approach the black object. As he did, he said the electrical sensations in the air grew more intense. But then suddenly, it was like he stepped into some sort of environmental bubble. All of the ambient sounds around him fell deadly silent. Peniston turned to speak to Burroughs, who was about 10 feet behind him. But to his shock, he saw that Burroughs was just stood there, frozen to the spot. Peniston tried to yell out to Burroughs, but he never reacted. Peniston continued to move forward, and said it felt like the object calmed down in some way. The lights on it began to dim. Peniston called through on his radio that this was a serious incident, and the integrity of the base was at risk. But he had no idea if he was being received by anyone.
I mean, you have to assume that, right? Especially, right, Cold War. You have to assume that, hey, there's something here. I can't quite explain what it is at the moment. I mean, can't even confirm if it bleeds or not yet. There's something here. Hey, shouldn't be here. Safety, security compromise. I mean, I feel that's a logical conclusion to make, especially in the heat of the moment, right? There is something here that should not be here in a arguably very tense time in human history. So I think that it becomes a logical next step, right, in terms of trying to control the situation.
His calls on the radio were simply met with silence. He was alone. Peniston always carried a small pocket notebook with him, and he pulled it out and started making notes about the object, as well as drawing some rough sketches of it.
Mm-hmm.
When he got close, he saw strange symbols etched into the body of the triangle. He did not recognise them, but said they looked slightly like Egyptian hieroglyphs.
A little bit, yeah, I noticed that.
Peniston then bravely touched the object. He said it felt hard and smooth like glass, but when he moved his hand over the symbols, they felt rough, like sandpaper. Touching the symbols, however, caused some sort of reaction. The white light on top of the triangle once again powered up and temporarily blinded him. At the time, although he couldn't see, Peniston felt that he could see a series of numbers in his mind's eye. All ones and zeros, but it quickly faded as his vision returned. As soon as he retracted his hand, the light began to dim. Peniston stood there for a little while longer, making notes before suddenly the object began to move. It very slowly started to float up above the ground and silently move upwards over the course of a couple of minutes. Once the object was high enough to be above the tree line, it shot off into the night sky.
I wonder if the pyramid ships from Destiny took inspiration from this story. Like, I kind of wonder if this has I mean, this feels like it could be partial influence for the marker from Dead Space, right? A little bit, right? Seeing numbers, seeing binary, seeing the marker symbols, right? I almost wonder, yeah, if this had some sort of hand in the Black Fleet in Destiny.
At a speed that Peniston noted as being impossible for any craft he had ever seen.
So this is a relevant addition. That's a red flag. Anything classified, which this certainly would have been regarding UFO or experimental craft, that notebook wouldn't be available unless the incident was declassified. So that is, that's interesting. That could be a piece in this puzzle.
Burroughs, who had been standing behind Peniston after the flash in his entry into the bubble, however, had a very different experience. After the initial blinding flash, Burroughs had also gotten to his feet, but he didn't see the black object at all. To him, in the centre of the clearing, it was just light. An oval-shaped red light that he said resembled the sun. He said this only lasted a few seconds as Peniston stepped towards it. Then in the blink of an eye, the object was in the sky and shot off towards the east. Although, confusingly, in his original statement 72 hours after the incident, he included his own sketch that looked a lot like Peniston's. Once it was gone, the men began to look around the area. When inspecting the ground, they saw there were 3 deep indentations in the ground from the legs of the craft. Branches on the edges of the clearing had all been snapped, including further up the trees.
What was Egypt doing during the Cold War? I'm trying to remember. What was Egypt doing approximately 1980? I'm trying to remember enough of world history at that point, because I don't remember what they were doing at that period of time. Were they allied with the Soviet Union? I don't actually know enough about that. But yeah, this is one of those that the notebook, the sketches, it's a little unless these are recreations, unless these are like in good faith recreations from accounts. Yeah, no, I don't know how that would survive. Well, even then, even Project Stargate, right? The CIA declassified. You can partially declassify a document. I didn't know that. You can partially declassify something. That way, there is still stuff that is, for all intents and purposes, redacted, while some of the information is declassified on a declassified classification request.
When they returned to the Jeep, Burroughs and Penniston believed they had been out of radio contact for around 5 to 10 minutes. A fact that was backed up when they checked their watches and saw they had been away for less than 10 minutes. However, it had actually been 45. Both watches were running 45 minutes slow. There had been some element of panic back at the base, having lost contact with the men for such a long period of time. When they were debriefed, it became apparent others saw something in the sky that night. Numerous others had seen lights, and they weren't the only ones to have some sort of direct encounter with it.
So it was the unsubscribed podcast thing we're reacting to earlier tonight in the stream, right? How drones fly a certain height above something, so you can't really hit them. So if there's any hint that there's something in the airspace over your base, right? I'm assuming that gets locked down really quick, right? Like, I'm sure being in Afghanistan, I'm sure being in the Middle East in any capacity, I'm sure, yeah, there's just a allied drone flying overhead, right? But like that stuff gets tracked, right? Like if somebody's like, hey, I got something here. Is that you guys? Oh yeah, sorry, it's us, man, right? Like, I'm assuming that that's kind of the interactions that get had. If there is something in your airspace, even if it's, not on radar, if there is something that people can see, or vice versa, people can't see something, but there's something on your radar, if there is something out of place, I'm assuming that gets locked down really quick. Like you go into iron shutters mode, right? Like we're going to resolve this. In fact, it would not surprise me if lockdowns would have been done for fairly arbitrary reasons, not necessarily that there's something in the air above your base, right? But like, I don't know, somebody didn't turn in a grenade, or somebody brought someone in who shouldn't be in, right? Not that would ever happen, right? Definitely would never happen. Nobody would ever sneak someone on base, especially overseas. Absolutely not. But if it were to happen, and someone was unaccounted for on base and it was found out, that feels like that would be a shutdown. And then that goes back to earlier on where we thought this was, a glitch. Nobody seemed to report it, especially if there were multiple eyewitness accounts. I don't know. But then again, that also implies that, insert job position here, insert thing that they should have really taken care of, but also insert argument about underpaid, whatever, right? But then again, counter argument is military, Cold War, and radar, right? There would have been, I'm assuming, some sort of, peer review, double check process, especially if people on the ground. I'm assuming someone's going to yell, hey, stuff's not working. Let's get this locked down, right? So, yeah, everything is considered to be a threat until proven otherwise. And yes, you're given heads up if a drone is in a potential detection zone, right? Totally makes sense to me. So that's kind of throwing up red flags to me. I'm kind of writing this off as just creepypasta status because I don't know too much about this. I don't really have a foot in the race in any capacity, right? I don't this is me hearing about this first and foremost through this, but enough of it just seems suspect enough already that I'm leaning towards being incredibly dismissive.
The same night, 2 more personnel reported lights in the forest. They too drove towards the source, but before they could get close enough to see what it was, a white light engulfed their Jeep, and the engine cut out and wouldn't restart. This incident happened in the forest outside the base, so the troops contacted the local police to inform them of what was happening. The police backed up in a statement that they had found a place where it appeared some sort of object had landed. By the next day, it had become a total joke amongst the troops on the base, with people joking about how Penniston and Burroughs had been out, chasing UFOs. The deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, checked in for duty, and began to hear his men making fun of the events that had taken place the previous evening. Holt asked them to refer to it as unexplained lights in the report.
So, in the intro, we kind of had a post account of dude in forest, right? Getting driven up on by men in black. So, I'm fairly certain. I know that, areas in Europe are going to be very, very small. I get it, right? I'm especially if you're near if you're near a base, I'm certain there's limits on where you can go, right? Right. Like if there was a base, right? Let's say army, right? And they were bordering a forest, right? Like there's a forest right next to it. I would be shocked if you could just walk through the entire forest. It would actually be very very shocking to me if there wasn't anything to deter people from the forest. Now, people go into the forest, right? Don't get me wrong, right? That being said, from a legal standpoint, right? Like, I'm sure there's some sort of deterrent, some sort of, hey, this is property that belongs to this base, or being labeled as private property. I'm certain that you can only go so far, and then that gets into how big is the forest? Is he in a part that isn't going to be under restriction? I don't know. Like it without a kind of bird's eye view of a map of things, I think it gets a little hard for me to kind of justify that.
And not a UFO, seemingly trying to ground the entire story. This could be something to be concerned about, and he didn't want the stigma of the UFO acronym placed on it.
So, clarification, you can't even tour civilian factories that make military equipment. Cool, that answers my question.
Base Commander Ted Conrad almost immediately took the various reports that had been made and classified them as secret. It appeared the higher-ups were taking this much more seriously than the base's troops. Holt should have been involved in this process, but it was passed over him for reasons he didn't understand. A small team was deployed to the site to take photographs of the evidence of the apparent landing, which backed up a lot of the evidence that Penniston and Burroughs had reported seeing. Night 2, 28th of December. The following evening, the base was having a delayed Christmas party on the on-base bar on the Woodbridge side. The drinks were flowing, fun was being had, and the jokes about aliens continued. Suddenly, an on-duty lieutenant named Bruce England crashed through the doors of the bar with a concerned look on his face. He rushed over to Colonel Holt and dragged him to one side. That was when he told him it was back. The UFO was back. Holt wanted to get to the bottom of this himself, so he grabbed a few men, Sergeant Monroe Nevels and Master Sergeant Bobby Ball, to join him on the investigation. Holt ordered some of the other troops to set up a series of lights and point them up into the sky. But strangely, all of the lights were either out of fuel or had seemingly malfunctioned. Holt, Nevels and Ball all headed into the forest, while the remaining few sober troops attempted to fix the lights. Incredibly, what happens next we can actually get a limited but direct insight into. Holt carried a handheld tape recorder with him everywhere he went, and that night he made a series of recordings.
Is that normal behavior? Is that normal behavior for someone in his position? Especially if we were criticizing the Notebook earlier, right? I don't know about that one.
Only 18 minutes of those recordings have ever been made public by the authorities.
Sure.
But Holt claims he made up to 5 hours of recordings on what he saw that night. He doesn't believe the rest of the tapes will ever be released to the public.
Sure.
For reasons that aren't exactly clear, Holt headed straight for the landing site from the previous encounter. The men brought with them some gear, including Geiger counters. When they arrived at the site, they found an area of the ground that appeared to be almost burnt looking. Sure enough, as they ran the Geiger counter over it, it at least temporarily spiked. It gave them an extremely high reading that was worth noting. However, although it was very high, the fact it was just a singular spike does point to it possibly being an error in the testing. They spoke about the marks on the tree. All had abrasions, facing towards the centre of the clearing. Then they began collecting samples from the soil in the indentations, left by the legs that were still visible, despite the harsh winter weather making the ground solid. Using night vision, they saw spots on the ground that were still showing as warm from the centre of the clearing. That was when things took a turn. They suddenly started to hear noises from nearby barnyard animals on a farm. The animals were suddenly starting to freak out.
Zero 148, we're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmers' barnyard animals. They're just very, very active, making an awful lot of noise.
Then they too saw a light. A strange small red light about a quarter of a mile away in the sky. It kept disappearing and reappearing. They moved to the edge of the clearing to try and get a better view through the trees. But that was when they realised all the animals had suddenly gone silent.
There's been a pigmentation.
You just saw a light where? Wait, slow down. Where?
Right in this position here, straight ahead, in between the tree. There it is again.
It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been.
Yellow.
It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way. Pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird.
To the left.
Yeah, definitely moving left.
Two lights.
One
light to the front,
okay.
One light to the left.
Keep the flashlights off. Here's something.
They then realised the light was heading right towards them. They turned their lights off and watched it move in their direction. Then it suddenly darted from left to right. The men were stood there in the darkness watching this light that they described as a giant red eye with a black ring around it, zigzagging through the tree line, with small sparks shooting off the sides of the light source. As it got closer, they claimed it looked like it shot a beam of light down to the ground. Holt said the light beam was pencil thin, like a laser beam, and hit the ground just 10 feet away from him. Then it zipped over to the Woodbridge base and shot the same beam down into the base. Eventually, this red light appeared to shoot off into 5 separate white lights, and then vanished. Soon after, however, they saw 3 lights in the sky that they described as star-like, moving in an irregular fashion across the night sky. While this was going on, John Burroughs had a second encounter. He had rushed back to the base as soon as word got to him that it was back. He felt strangely drawn to the lights. Holt had specifically told his men to keep Burroughs away from the landing site, seemingly not wanting him to influence their perception of what was going on. Although once the lights began to appear, they requested that Burroughs come to confirm it was the same thing he had seen the previous evening. As Burroughs and his driver drove towards the location of the lights, they were hit by some sort of blinding blue light. They got out of the Jeep and claimed they could see a white object floating in the distance. As they walked towards it, the blue light started to move into their path. Burroughs kept walking forward, before disappearing into the light, and apparently not returning for several minutes. He had no memory of what happened when he stepped into the light. In total, around 80 men across the 2 bases claimed to have seen some element of the events that took place across these 2 nights, not including a whole host of locals in the area who also reported sightings of strange lights in the sky. In the days that followed, Peniston kept being plagued by visions of the ones and zeros he had seen when he touched the craft. Eventually they became so persistent he wrote them down. A whole 16 pages of ones and zeros. This note was kind of glossed over when put together with all the other crazy incidents that were taking place. The initial reports that were conducted in the aftermath stressed that the people involved in this case were to be taken seriously, and spoke highly of their character as witnesses. Some of the men who were interviewed, however, were simply handed statements and told to sign without reading them, telling them it would be simpler for them to do so, and that it would end their involvement in this incident, which many of those who had been involved would have been quite happy to wash their hands of. No statements were taken at the time from the men involved in the incidents on the second night. The officials were seemingly only interested in what happened on the first evening. Burroughs and Peniston were interviewed over a dozen times, in a style that often bordered on interrogation rather than fact-finding. Holt later claimed that the men were injected with truth serum, time after time, something that could have caused serious damage to them.
That's science fiction though, right? I guess technically I'm speaking from a modern knowledge standpoint. There is no Veritasium. There's no Veritaserum. There's no true serum. I could also be wrong. That could be one of those things that people have to go, I can neither confirm nor deny. But I mean, chemical process wise, I don't even know how that would begin to function. I don't even know how you begin to get something like a true serum. I don't know. That feels very, very science fiction-esque, but I will definitely cite that I'm coming from a very ignorant standpoint. Could be placebo effect, form of torture, right? Just it makes you feel uncomfortable, makes you want to confess something, right? This is hand interrogation. I don't know. This is, especially when we start alleging that a truth serum exists. It's okay, but in what capacity, right? A polygraph is what? 51% effective. It's a slightly favorable coin flip, but people swear by, the polygraph said this, right? But it's a slightly favorable coin flip. I don't know. Too much chance to speak. Exactly. I don't know. This is one of those that that does kind of yoink me out a little bit from remotely taking this in a serious capacity. And I think a lot of people also will just go, yeah. I mean, from the notebook, the pocket books, to radio, the recordings, right? Even if a lot of it's redacted, we still have public in some capacity. There's enough about this that kind of just, I'm thinking along the lines of the Kandahar Giant, right? Even if, and this is a huge if, this is true. The assumption would be, if any information got out, it would be too just wild and outlandish, and even just kind of makes people scratch their heads. What? What do you mean, right? That the absurdity of it, that was the word I was looking for, absurdity. The absurdity of it would kind of do damage control on its own. I don't know. I mean, this is Cold War. This is, CIA's doing stuff. I'm sure the FBI is doing stuff. The KGB is doing stuff. I'm sure other governments over the world, other entities were doing stuff. Cuba was doing stuff. Turkey was doing stuff because it was Turkey at that time. Empire long since gone at that point. So I don't know. It's a very interesting time period. And I think it is ripe for, Call of Duty Black Ops style, fan fictions and fiction pieces, fictional scenarios and stuff. So-called truth serums only rely on making it too hard to think of a lie and losing inhibitions without telling the truth. So okay, so you are going for almost a sedative effect, right? Maybe I don't know the correct word of that. It depends. Hearing truth serum, that opens up a line of questioning from me specifically.
The amount of interviews they were forced to sit through. Both American and British authorities were trying to make it the other country's problem to investigate this incident further. It felt like no one wanted to deal with it, and they just hoped the entire incident would go away. Mm-hmm. A few details, particularly the dates the events took place, seem to have caused some confusion, with both Holt and Peniston initially confusing the days the events took place on. Colonel Holt wrote the following statement, which would be given to the authorities some weeks later. Subject: unexplained lights. Early in the morning of the 27th of December, 1980, approximately 3 a.m., 2 US Air Force security police patrolmen saw unusual lights outside the back gate at RAF Woodbridge. Thinking an aircraft might have crashed or been forced down, they called for permission to go outside the gate to investigate. The on-duty flight chief responded and allowed 3 patrolmen to proceed on foot. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base, and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsing red light on top, and a bank of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering, or on legs, As the patrolman approached the object, it manoeuvred through the trees and disappeared. At this time, the animals on the nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later, near the back gate.
So this seemingly is an official document. I don't know if this actually passes the authenticity test or not. I don't quite know how on an official US form we have the object was either hovering or on legs. Two things that seemingly contradict each other. I don't know. I'm also not familiar with how paperwork like this is filed and the capacity this is filed in, if this is meant to be factual, if this is meant to be an account. Yeah, this one's an odd one.
The next day, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, were found where the object had been sighted on the ground. The following night,
Okay, so in the 80s, sodium pentothal was called true serum. It's a very strong sedative that doesn't induce unconsciousness unless that's OD levels. Okay, so it does kind of border on like that uncomfortability thing that I was kind of talking about, but it does so in quite a different way. Got it. Okay.
9th of December 1980. The area was checked for radiation. Beta and gamma readings of 0.1 were recorded with peak recordings. In the 3 depressions and near the centre of the triangle formed by the depressions, a nearby tree had moderate readings on the side of the tree, towards the depression. Later in the night, a red sun-like light was spotted through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point it appeared to throw off glowing particles, and then broke into 5 separate white objects and disappeared. Immediately afterwards, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky. 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south, all of which were about 10 degrees off the horizon. The objects moved rapidly in a sharp angular movements, and displayed red, green and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical, through an 8 to 12 power lens. They then turned to full circles. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. The object to the south was visible for 2 to 3 hours, and beamed down a stream of light from time to time. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3.
This paper is the only mention so far in this video, I think. I'd have to go back, of green lights. Because mostly it's been red and blue, right?
Signed Charles Holt, Deputy Base Commander. This statement would be the same one that was picked up years later by the British tabloids, as evidence that the US military had encountered a UFO in Suffolk of all places. As it was leaked to the press, the story became confused and distorted. A number of people have inserted themselves into the story of Rendlesham over the years, and as the encounter became more and more famous, the story has become more and more over the top, and the lines between truth, lie, and everything in between has been blurred.
This reads to me, and I'm going to say the funny word, this reads to me as a psyop at that point, right? Like, that reads to me as this is intentional disinformation, or could be used as intentional disinformation. To which clarification of, if this is a raw transcript, the hovering or on legs would be a direct quote from a person giving the account. Raw transcripts are rarely used in official documents. Like, I guess to what end, right? I guess to what end would I assume that this would be misinformation, disinformation warfare? But, I mean, we also, quite literally from the Fat Electrician, have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, in my opinion, that modern art was a CIA psyop. So, there is that. Once again, citation of the Cold War was kind of just, a spicy, wacky, inflatable tube man of a time. Yeah, I guess if I have to look at it through that angle, it makes sense.
There are a number of possible explanations that have been put forward over the years. Around the time the events took place, a Russian satellite was said to have been breaking up over England. There was on one evening a meteor shower taking place. Others have pointed to the fact that a nearby lighthouse blinks on and off every 5 seconds at night, and is visible on a clear evening through the forest. That one in particular is often cited as a piece of powerful evidence to debunk the events. However, it seems strange to me that men who had been stationed there for weeks, months or even years wouldn't have already been aware of the lighthouse if it was that visible. There has also been suggestions that the event was a prank conducted by the SAS to torment the American troops stationed in their country.
Okay, if that held water, that would be fantastic. That is the "it's just a prank, bro" that I would love. When the "it's just a prank" ends up causing actual like internal documents and internal meetings. That's fun. Good God. Military pranks actually built different.
As well as a rather strange story about burning manure and a man named Peter Turtle being responsible for the lights in the forest.
What a cool dude, Peter Turtle. Like, what a cool dude.
Others have suggested the misreporting of dates was done on purpose to not coincide with the meteor shower or satellite incident. All of these have been thrown around, and they certainly could explain some of the sightings that many of the people who claim to have seen things on those 2 nights reported.
Right.
However, it certainly doesn't explain everything. A member of the House of Lords, Lord Hill Norton, took a particular interest in the Rendlesham case.
Was Lord Buckethead nominated for House of Lords? I can't remember. Was he the House of Lords or House of Commons? Oh my God, some of the House of Lord titles are fantastic. They're peak. They're meme.
And I thought I'd include this interesting quote from him about the case. My position, both privately and publicly expressed over the last dozen years or more, is that there are only 2 possibilities. Either A, an intrusion into our airspace and a landing by unidentified craft took place at Rendlesham as described, or B, the deputy commander of an operational nuclear-armed US Air Force base in England, and a large number of his enlisted men are either hallucinating or lying. So let's wrap things.
Okay, if we are going to go down that route, I want to bring up very specifically the Mad Gasser of Matten, how that was allegedly just a mass hallucination, right? That was a result of his mass hysteria, right? I mean, if we're gonna bring up a mass hysteria, mass hallucination, I'd like to submit the Mad Gasser of Matten. I'd like to submit that as evidence A for a counter argument. Oh man.
Things up, if you'll indulge me for a moment, with a slightly more out there twist to this tale. We're going to go back to those numbers that Penniston claimed he saw when he first touched the craft. In 2010, Penniston finally put the notebook pages out there, and it was quickly identified as being binary code.
That literally would have been that would have been possessed, right? Like that would have definitely been like what would this man have had to do? Shove the entire notebook up his bunghole? Like I don't know how this in good faith is kept for so long. I don't know. I mean, allegedly you have people trying to take home like flash grenades and stuff. You have allegedly people trying to take home stuff. I don't know if they're successful or not. There are processes for that, especially when you are dealing with an unknown like this. I'm assuming stuff like this would definitely get taken, right? So I don't know if I really trust the authenticity in a vacuum.
When the code was deciphered, it left some very interesting information. The notebook was carbon dated and has been confirmed it was written back in the period of time the Rendlesham Forest incident took place.
Okay.
When it was translated, there were a few phrases mixed in with coordinates. It started with the words, exploration of humanity. Towards the end, the phrases, eye of your eyes was revealed. But in between these 2 points were a list of coordinates. The locations mapped to Caracol, Belize, Sidonia in Arizona, the Great Pyramid of Giza, the Nazca Lines in Peru, Taishan China, the Temple of Apollo in Greece, And most interestingly of all, the reported location of a legendary island off the coast of Ireland, named High Brazil, that is believed to have never existed.
This is the first I'm hearing of this. I've not heard of the one from China. I have no idea what that is. I have no idea what this is. This is the first I'm ever hearing of this.
Despite being featured on multiple maps in the past. The final translated line reads, Origin year 8100. Thank you for joining me on this entry into the tape library. I've tried to keep the focus on the events that took place across the 2 nights here, but there is so much more to this case. Everything from cover-ups to potential other witnesses. I'd love to hear what you thought about this one, and if you know information that can fill in some of the gaps of what's happened in the aftermath, then please feel free to share in the comments below. I'd love it if the comment section could become a place for you all to discuss your theories, or other apparent versions of how these things took place. I always try to work from the most direct sources that I can, but that obviously doesn't always mean it's the definitive version of what really took place, especially with something as complicated as this. If you ever find yourself in Rendlesham, you can actually hike the UFO trail there, and there is a statue of the craft that you can visit. That rounds us out for what has been a fun year for the tape library. About 2 months ago, to be honest, I was questioning the future of this channel. As much as I was enjoying it, it does take up a lot of my limited free time, and it really wasn't getting much traction over the last few months.
I honestly feel that. Like, I do feel that as somebody who has to push out sometimes 4 videos a day. Hopefully, wink wink, you go look in the description and you check out not only this original video, but their channel as well, and what other works they've worked on. And I want to do what I can to hit what parts of the algorithm that I do to signal boost what I thought was a really cool channel, honestly.
So I'm so thrilled to suddenly have so many new people checking out the channel every single day. 2024 is shaping up to be a good one, and I have an ever-growing list of cases I want to cover. There may only be 1 episode in January. I'm actually releasing a feature film in January and have the premiere of that, so we'll be a little busy with that side of things. But once that's out the way, it'll be full steam ahead with the tape library. Our first episode of 2024 will hopefully see us delving back into history to talk about an old haunting that I wasn't familiar with myself until recently. So I hope you all have a brilliant Christmas if you celebrate it, and I'll see you on the other side. Oh, and remember, there is an old tradition of telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve, so why not check out a few older episodes to get you through that dark night. Until next time, pleasant dreams.
I thought it was cool. I thought it was really good. I want to be clear that me taking necessary issue with something is not a jab. That is more of a me as someone who likes to try and figure out and try to problem solve and debunk things looking at it. The presentation, though, in my opinion, was amazing. I thought the presentation was great. I thought the presentation was good. And that being said, taking it from accounts, right, makes sense. To which added context was needed. Carbon dating only says when the paper was made in the ink, but not when it was written. To which, correct, yes, that would be how that works. It would be a different process entirely to try and even determine when it was written, correct. So, I mean, you can argue that there were things about this that stacked up. There were things about this that didn't stack up. And maybe you're somewhere in between about this. I literally never heard about this until quite literally this video. And I really like seeing that we have a lot more horror channels. I have a soft spot for horror. I will go on entire horror binges. And so it's really cool to see not only things we've reacted to, like Wartime Stories, Bedtime Stories, Mr. Ballin, Mr. Nightmare, etc., but to see how we have things like, the tape library, and I like that they add that specific twist onto it. Like in the other video that I watched by them, the Sudbrink calls, excuse me, I have trouble pronouncing that last name offhand. the Sudbrink calls situation. I literally didn't know this was a thing until watched his video on it. And it was really cool that he kind of provides the tapes. It's really cool that he kind of does some of that stuff. I honestly really like it, and I want this channel to get far more recognition. So definitely go ahead and like the video. I myself am going to be dropping a subscribe. I don't turn on notifications because I get enough notifications as is. However, I really, really liked this. And part of why I want to do React content, why I still do it, is as much as it ends up, being a time sink, as much as it ends up being, we sit here for an hour each video at this point, it's really fun to watch some of these. And it's really fun to see what different people bring to the table and point out really cool people. But, go visit him. I'm probably going to watch the Gate to Hell at some point soon. That seems like a really cool video. I don't know if I'll react to it or not, but this was really cool. Thank you everyone for watching. Really do appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one. It was really cool. I liked it.